the previous videos, we have mentioned about the purposes of conducting the literature review as well as outlining the scope of the literature review. It was mentioned that the literature review is not just a summary of the existing knowledge. It is more like putting the pieces of fragmented knowledge together to see the entire pictures of the knowledge available within a field of study. There will be a series of analysis of the existing knowledge, looking for the missing pieces, as well as the inconsistency or shortcomings of the current knowledge, and find the directions for further studies. It also involves a lot of critical thinkings and synthesizing of the knowledge available, as well as making hypotheses for the potential breakthrough of certain topics of the study. In these videos, we're going to proceed with the introductions of the literature review. First, we're going to look at the process of literature review. It is basically identifying the relevant topics of concepts and also citing the relevant sources. We have mentioned about the citing of the sources in the previous chapters, where all the sources that you have referred need to be properly cited as an attributions to the persons who have contributed to the field of the study. Failure of citing the relevant sources will be considered as plagiarism. Therefore, you will expect a typical literature review will have a lot of paper being cited. You can say a majority of the references listed at the end of the technical writings will concentrate at the chapters for the literature review. You also know that doing the literature review will involve extensive reference of various publications, and normally we are not just referring to one or two papers. Instead, we are talking about as many papers as possible which is related to the topics. Some researchers may recommend a minimum or a maximum numbers of publications being reviewed. However, I would say that the numbers of the publications reviewed will be as many as you could find, which is relevant to your study. And often, it is depending on the topic study, the numbers of the publications which is accessible within the capacity of yourself as well as your institutions may vary depending on the topics. Therefore, I would recommend to your maximum capacity, you will need to review as many relevant papers as possible. The purpose is for you to get the bigger pictures of the existing knowledge as well as the current achievement of the technologies, and most of all is for you to prevent any possibility of having bias understanding regarding a topic of study. With that, you will have to review a lot of papers at the same time, and most of the time you might not be able to remember every single one of them. Even though that you have encountered several important points which you can recall, that you have read it somewhere, but you can't remember where is the source of the publications. You lost trace of the relevant papers, and it's going to consume you sometimes to acquire back the relevant publications. Therefore, you are always recommended to make notes while you're doing the literature review. Whenever you encounter an important point, you can highlight and make remarks so that you can always come back to it later. With that, the more papers that you have reviewed, you will gather more important points and concepts, which is going to be helpful for you later in putting those pieces together and in your own works, based on your own understanding, you may start writing for the literature review. A comprehensive literature survey should methodically analyze and synthesize quality achieved works. There are 3 points here. First is analyzing the literature using proper and systematic methods. Second is synthesizing the existing knowledge. And the third one is you need to review the works of quality. This implies that you're going to require a screening process for you to first determine whether the relevant publications is related to your study, which at the same time you will need to be able to differentiate between quality works and works of poor qualities. Those with poor quality, which appears to be quite doubtful in terms of the credibility, which might lead to you some suspicions in terms of their findings, you will need to put them on hold, see if it is necessary to be put into the list of the review. Then the next question is, how do you identify those words are of quality or those are with poor quality? First, you can differentiate from the qualities of the journal's papers. Normally good and high impact factors, journals papers, they are more rigorously reviewed. This can be one of the indications that the presented works are of quality. Second, you can look into their contents, especially in terms of the discussions as well as the tests conducted, and also the aspect being covered by the relevant works, which will be more thorough and rigorous, and whichever findings are normally supported with good evidence and justifications. Normally, good quality works will cover a broader aspects and giving more in-depth discussions, and their results and findings are normally supported with good justifications and verifications. The two that I have mentioned are some guidelines for you to identify the quality works. In fact, if you have reviewed quite a number of papers, you will see significant inconsistency in terms of the quality of the works from the papers to another papers. The more papers that you have reviewed, you will have a clearer sense whether the papers is of quality or not in good qualities. Sometimes it is also quite arguable in terms of filtering those works which you feel is not quality but end up to be one of the important pieces in the study. Then it will be based on your own wisdoms whether to take into the works into the account in terms of the literature review. And then go back to our previous discussions that the literature review is not doing the summary. It is in fact centered within the concepts and principles. This alone already is able to filter a lot of unquality works, as most of these words are focusing in presenting the results, describing the results, but without the discussions of the working principles and the concept working behind it. If you have your literature review focusing on the concepts and principles, there will be no point of putting this kind of the publications in your list of references, as it contribute nothing onto the knowledge. It is just presentations of their results. Next, a comprehensive literature survey should provide a firm foundations to a topic of interest and the choice of suitable research methodologies. Now that you have identified the quality works, you analyze the literature using systematic and rigorous procedures, and you start synthesizing the available knowledge, making sense of the interrelationship between the theories and principles. Now you need to provide firm foundations of the topics that you are studying, making sense of the heads and tails of the topics for your better understanding of the topic, as well as constructing the understandings of the readers in terms of the topics that you are studying. We also provide directions for you to find suitable research methodology for your study. Choosing a right research methodology for your study is also important. It needs to be carefully selected so that it fulfills the purpose of the study. The research method has to be properly designed to be as thorough as possible. It needs to be rigorous, systematic, and eliminated all the possible errors or unjustified factors within your study. You will see a similar research might end up with different research methodology being used by the relevant researchers. You will need to study their research methodologies as well as the conditions that they are studying, and also the purpose of doing this kind of study, and trying to relate the research methodology with yours and choose the best one that fit the purpose of your study. Also, a comprehensive literature survey should demonstrate the proposed work will have a novel contributions to the overall field of research. This is also very important, and based on my personal experience, most of the students miss this in their literature review. In your literature review, you will have to demonstrate the value of your works and why it is important to have the works being conducted. You have to skillfully demonstrate or imply the noble contributions of your works and in what ways that it can contribute to the overall field of study. And bear in mind that it is not just a claim that how you can contribute to the study. Your noble contributions will have to be specific and clearly demonstrated to the reader the specific gap of knowledge that you are actually feeling, so that the readers will have an idea the positions of your studies for them to more easily grasp the purpose of your studies. In short, literature review is not as easy as most of the postgraduate students think, many considering it as a summary of the existing knowledge, which is not true. Some may have better understanding in terms of the literature review, knowing that on top of the summaries of the existing knowledge, there will be some critical inputs from the author themselves, analyzing and synthesizing the knowledge. And this two alone is still not entirely true, but this has already constituted a decent literature review. And if you could go one step further by demonstrating the noble contributions of your works in specific to the overall field of the study, that would be good. And there is one more point that is worth mentioning, where many postgraduate students, when they do the proposal defense, always there is a questions being posed by the examiner asking about the noble contributions of their study, or asking about the knowledge gap that they intend to fill. There is a reason why this kind of questions is very popularly being asked among the examiners. It is because that most of the students do not really clearly state their noble contributions to the field of the study in their literature review or in their research proposal. So whenever you are doing the literature review, you will need to be mindful of the third criteria here so that you are able to answer this kind of questions.